I've never seen so many tectonic shifts, primarily at the government and military side, but also at the commercial side, influenced by government policy in my 37 years.
This is the Time on Wing podcast. Welcome back, Heavy Check edition. I'm Courtney Miller with Visual Approach Analytics. With me, as always, Garrick Deschavant of Collateral Verifications, who will explain what I mean. Garrick, who are we talking to today?
Today, we will have a guest that you will know. You've heard him before, and he is great to have on, so we're looking forward to chatting with him. We're going to have Richard Aboulafia. The reason why this will be the Heavy Check edition is obviously it is his time on wing, but he's already done it, so now it's time for a little bit of a heavy check.
He's coming back for his heavy check.
Coming back, that's right. It's been long enough where he needs to go through a heavy check to be able to go back out and extract the most time on wing we can. A little bit about Richard, just to remind everybody. So he is currently managing director at the AeroDynamic Advisory. Before that, he was VP of analysis at Teal Group, and where he wrote and edited the World Military and Civil Aircraft Briefing. He also has done some jet engine market analysis for Jane's Information Group. He's supported some research projects for Brookings Institution. He's got a bachelor's from George Washington University and a master's in War Studies from King's College in London. He is a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society. He writes articles for, I think, everybody, as far as I know. I mean, Aviation Week, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, you name it, that's where he is. He's also done a gazillion podcasts, been on TV, done radio programs, so he's been around, and everybody loves to hear what his thoughts are. So we'll definitely have a great time speaking with him today. So, Richard, this is your heavy check and your time on wing. So, before we get on with our guest, which you guys are going to absolutely love, we obviously, first of all, we want to thank all our listeners for listening to us and making the show what it is today. And we certainly welcome any of you to, whenever you see us at conferences, just please say hello. And we'd love to hear that you guys are listening and fans of the show. As you all know, we do run businesses. And so from my end at Collateral Verifications, on the appraisal side, right, obviously, if you have any needs when it comes to aircraft, engine, landing gear, you name it, right, just please feel free to reach out. I'm very approachable. I'm happy to chat about any kind of projects, and we'd love to work with you on a variety of things. We do have some publications out there as well. I do Turbine Aircraft Guide, Turboprop Value Guide. I've got the Aircraft Rating Tool. So there's various publications that we put together that can kind of help you on your day-to-day. Great reference points. So definitely, kind of reach out to us, and we'd love to chat and kind of start that relationship with you.
Okay, back to the show.
So Richard, thanks for coming back on the show. We certainly, love to kind of hear your thoughts on everything that's going on and reading, all the great things that you put out. So it's always nice to have you back on. And there's a lot of things going on in the world. So love to kind of get your take on any and all of it. There's definitely, I think, some things going on in the, in the defense side that's interesting. And so I'm sure our listeners will probably, be interested with that. But so I don't know. I think maybe the best way to kind of get started is maybe if there's anything new going on with, AeroDynamic Advisory, like what you guys are up to, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. And great to be back on the show. Long-time listener, second-time caller, third time? Lost track, I think.
I think it's two.
Second time, yeah.
Second time. So great to be back on. What's new? Shirts. We always get shirts. Shireen Riolo, our operations lead, is great about merch, and she got us these spiffy shirts for our last team event. And speaking of team events, we're getting together for our annual week in the office week next week. And we got a new office. I'm really thrilled to announce. So anyone out there who still sends us snail mail, please change it to the new address on the website. But it is a fantastic space, a little bit bigger, a few blocks away in Ann Arbor, my adopted hometown, where I get to every few months. And but that hiring a couple new people and chronicling the massive changes in our beloved industry. I mean, there's so much going on, and I've never seen so many tectonic shifts, primarily at the government and military side, but also at the commercial side, influenced by government policy, in my 37 years. So this is like, wow, new things. And I'm like trying to teach things to our younger people. And I'm like, yeah, but this is new for me too, right? I don't, so lots going on. Thanks for asking.
But it's new. That it's new to you is far more impactful than being new to somebody with less experience. Simply, like, just that fact is a key data point in its own right? So you're looking at changes over, I don't know, how long's your career been? 80, 90 years? What is
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, in that range. It's different than somebody who's been around for 5.
Right.
Right. So that in itself is fascinating.
I could say, I could quote Mr. T and say, I pity the fool, and no one would get that, right? Like that way back.
These days, they'd be like, who's Mr. T?
Mr.
What?
T, right. And
listen, I threw out...
Washington, I'm a Washington, D.C., or so is he. So I claim a kind of, fraternity thing going on with him.
I threw out a reference to the $1 Million Man on a call the other day.
Oh, my God.
Garrick was the only one that got it.
Yeah, it was really bad.
That's how old we are now.
Shades
it was a really bad impression.
$1 million! I think that was my last doctor's visit. I was like, it's $1 million for these routine checks.
So the defense side, I mean, let's just jump right in. Obviously, new, not a side that Garrick and I follow much at all, but one that definitely affects the commercial side. Really kind of interested in your, I guess, in the context of history, the take on what is so impactful on the defense side right now. Well, let's start there, and then how that impacts commercial will come later. But what is going on in defense?
Yeah, and you're right to look at them holistically, because I think the broader theme is government involvement, basically a greater emphasis on nationalism and sovereignty and other factors that are affecting both the civil and the military market. There's so much to say about the commercial side, too. I don't want to bore you, you non-defense types, with the arcania of Washington, D.C. defense stuff, but there are big changes. Even in the world of budgeting, it used to be sort of this, okay, here's this year's defense budget, but it gives you some insight, programs coming into the next. But this time we have something called reconciliation, which is this giant sugar high pile of cash, almost $1 trillion, of which, about 400 or so in investment funds. Except it doesn't, it's basically some sort of giant add-on to prior year budgets, and it won't necessarily be followed up. So people are trying to make these plans for new defense programs like NGAD, for example, Next Generation Air Dominance, F-47 in Boeing, in Boeing U.S. Air Force terminology. And it's hard. It's hard to see what the budget time horizon is. So that's new. The other thing is that even though Elon Musk and Doge are sort of, let's just say you're not going to meet too many of them in Washington, D.C. right now, but they did have a bit of influence in this belief that the new tech defense companies led by the Palantirs, the Andurils, the Shield AIs, and hundreds of others, all of which backed by very generous, deep-pocketed venture capital and private equity funds, Peter Thiel leading the way with Anduril, all of them want their share. And so you've got a slightly bigger defense budget with uncertain timelines and continuity, and a bunch of it has to be diverted towards these new guys with their amazing political connections. They've got some pretty cool ideas, but they've got no real execution track record at all. So sure hope they deliver, and it's not just one colossal investment bubble gone wrong. The Economist this week refers to Palantir as something like the single most overvalued company in history or something like that. I sure hope that they're able to scale up and invest, and they are hiring. That's good. But
in history, though, I mean, come on, we've got Theranos in there. OpenAI is pushing for a $500 billion valuation. I think they're at $300 billion. I appreciate the point they were trying to make, but woof.
No. That's it. Look, there's hyperbole in there, but the point is, it's a giant new part of the industry, and it's taking up resources we hope they deliver. So that's big. The other change I would point to very big is that this is very much an America first, make America great again, America first, hearkening back to the charming Nazi adjacent America first crowd of the 1930s, but put that aside for a moment. And every priority they have is non-expeditionary warfare. It's U.S. homeland, Golden Dome, and programs like the F-47 that'll never be exported and probably won't be deployed abroad either. And everything expeditionary is taking a hit, including, say, NAVAIR or F-35 or the E-7 AWACS program. So the one thing I'm most grateful for as we approach Christmas gradually is that NATO is still intact, because I have no doubt that if it weren't for the Senate and other people, these guys would be out of it. I did many years ago, I grew up with a dad who was an infantryman in World War II, and he said, defense means nothing if you don't have friends. That was his one takeaway, having been stationed in Britain after he was invalided out after Hurtgen Forest. And I did my master's thesis at NATO headquarters. I still have NATO, your best bet for peace, a little sticker they handed me sometime around 40 or 50 years ago, whenever it was. And I'm just grateful that we're still in the NATO alliance and other key alliances.
How can NATO become, now that we're way off on a tangent here, but can NATO become effectively irrelevant before it disintegrates? Like, could it already be in the disintegration process without officially being removed? And Article 5, I guess, would be the biggest. I mean, basically, that's all NATO is.
Article 5 is the heart of it.
Yeah.
An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
I would frame things a little different. Not to say I'm always a glass half full person. I'm not known for that, but I'm a little bit glass half full. I think that the alliance has been given new life by the threat to it. And if you want to be super charitable to the Trump administration, maybe there are a few of them who hoped it would have a galvanizing effect. I don't think many, but maybe some of them, maybe just maybe. Now, can it rise to the occasion? Can it take advantage of this opportunity to, reassert itself and show that it can re-equip and maintain an alliance even with U.S. withdrawals and the very real possibility that the U.S. Abandons its allies? I hope so. I really hope so. I spent most of the summer in Europe, spoke with a lot of people, and starting at the Paris Air Show and going on from there. And there are serious areas of weakness, especially with they say they're going to spend 3.5% of GDP on defense, plus 1.5% in this sort of defense adjacent realm. And there's so much disagreement about what all of this means and whether people will be committed. But nevertheless, I think this is an opportunity for them to reinvent NATO.
From that perspective, the defense spending targets, and there may be a simple answer to this. I'm way outside my area here. But if they say they're going to spend 3.5% on GDP, who determines what counts as defense? Yeah,
the 3.5 part is, the good news is it's pretty clear. It's in your defense budget. It has to be personnel, R&D, procurement. The other 1.5% is squishy as hell. As a matter of fact, there's talk of finally constructing a bridge between Sicily and the mainland of Italy, which has been dreamt of since the days of Pliny the Elder, and having it paid for by out of that budget. Oh, it's national security. Yeah. All right. The bigger question, I think, is that 3.5% is kind of backloaded. Like, you have to get there in 9 years. So what stops you from doing 1.8% and then all of a sudden, claiming victory in year 9? No one knows the answer to that. There are all kinds of complications.
Interesting, yeah. So, and do you think that because of the loose timeline for this, especially in the U.S. for the budget, I mean, does that push companies to just try to do a lot more upfront, right? Trying to show that, hey, we deserve a piece of that by, kind of throwing resources at things that may or may not be viable anyway, but they're just trying to get their fair share before it goes away?
Yeah, that's totally right. I mean, there's this objective that we can do it. battlefield architectures, drones of all flavors, including, of course, the ever popular collaborative combat aircraft. It's, start us off. We'll show you. We can do this. And, we'll see, right? And meanwhile, there are some programs that are just getting going that do depend upon a ramp up, B-21 being a very good example, which are by, of course, legacy primes. And they're trying to keep their share because otherwise those programs are at risk. And there are many other programs that are falling by the wayside with the cash presumably to be harvested for the new priorities. The Army's ITAP new helicopter engine, for example, or again, the AWACS program and a lot of Army aviation, an awful lot of Army aviation. FAXX, the carrier-borne new fighter program. All of this is, under risk as people, go for what they can do and hope to prove themselves able to do it.
So, from the context of from the U.S. and defense exports, how much? Let's just talk about the F-35 and that program. How much of the F-35 program is reliant on exports to other countries, and how much do you think that may be at risk, given kind of the new politics? I don't mean like the stuff that's already been done, but kind of going forward. Just as an example of the F-35.
Yeah, we're finding out, right? And even the ones at home, even the number, the answer is roughly, 60-40, 60% domestic, 40% export, roughly. But gradually shifting towards export, because it is a product that people want. Some people, others are concerned about reliance upon U.S. weaponry at a time like this, and while they're under the gun for other reasons. The U.S. numbers are tumbling, or at least they have in the budget. We're waiting and seeing whether any will be made good by Congress. It sure doesn't look like it. So domestic numbers are falling a bit. So far, Canada has reacted to, everything. The slight shift in U.S. foreign policy where it's, Operation Piss Off the Planet. We've even made enemies of the Canadians. I don't know how you do that,
That's impressive.
It's like, how do you get 40 Canadians out of a swimming pool? You ask them politely, that's the oldest joke in the book, So we've somehow made them an enemy, and they're reviewing their F-35 purchase for 88 planes. Spain just announced the other day, no thank you. Portugal said not looking at it. Switzerland 2 days ago said our purchase is now under review because of the U.S. tariffs against Switzerland. Other countries, though, like the UK and Denmark, are ordering, if anything, more. Belgium, too, I believe. So it's sort of mixed, generally downward. There is the possibility that on a transactional basis, new customers enter the mix, possibly India, possibly Saudi Arabia, UAE, but this is uncertain and, of course, greatly complicated. In the here and now, you could just say there's a bunch at risk, and I hope we don't alienate these key customers, because this is part of our great industrial base and part of our great defense industry. It's our flagship program.
How much of this risk, and again, just to the F-35, it's an easy example of kind of a lot of this defense spending, import, export defense spending, but how much of that risk do you think is, so Switzerland, for example, do you believe they're reviewing that order as a response to trade and tariff impacts, as more of a commercial response? Or how much of it is, wait a minute, who is our biggest threat here? For instance, Canada. Truly, who is our biggest threat? And it just emerged that it may actually be the one that shares the largest border for them. Which is at play? Which factors moving more, do you think?
Great question. I think Canada, of course, is, the pointless threat of territorial aggrandizement. It's like, okay, why are we buying from you guys? But trade is the crap ice cream on that miserable cake. And
crap cherry. Yeah.
Switzerland doesn't feel threatened, for obvious reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Come at me, bro. I think that's their country slogan.
Yeah.
Come at me, bro. That is exactly it. Maybe unless J.D. Vance, takes his family there and orders them to shorten a mountain for his skiing purposes or something. I don't think it's going to happen. So for them, it's just about trade, and they're an export-driven, economy dependent upon luxury goods. And you slap a whatever it is, 46%, 50% tariff. Ouch. So they feel, why buy 36 F-35s? I get it. Either way, we're making enemies left and right. The only miracle is that somehow the Danes are somehow even nicer than the Canadians. That's weird. They're super nice, and they're sticking with their order despite the fact that we threatened to take Greenland for some stupid reason.
Yeah. So I guess with all of that, how do you see what's going on the defense side impacting the commercial or the civil side?
Well, the greater theme here is nationalism and sovereignty. Basically going from a multilateral world where people all cooperate, and it's really great for jets. You guys grew up in this era, boy, MTV, I love the 90s, right? Free trade agreements, go wherever you want, airline deregulation. It's changing. It's all changing fast. And I've got one big illustration of that I'm fascinated by. The start of my career was sort of the tail end of government influenced jetliner purchases, where you had these very high level visits saying, your airline will buy this. And the last gasp was the Clinton administration's heavy-handed sales campaign in Saudi Arabia back when it was about 5 years into my career, early 90s. And it was sort of a fascinating thing. But then the WTO made that illegal. Basically, the Agreement on Trade in Civil Aircraft said you can't do that. Now, some people, China, still there was an aspect of that. But for the most part, it went away. This year, it has come back hugely, bigly, if you will.
Yeah.
And I fear we're just starting to see it again. This government interference in what should be straightforward airline fleet planning decisions, with all kinds of big consequences for the market and the industry. So I think that's one thing I'd identify, along with, of course, the trade issue, the potential that we reverse these deregulatory trends and we reverse these free trade trends, and inevitably air travel growth rates will suffer. That's just the way it works.
We've already seen that. If you look at just the US-China, right? That market is still significantly suppressed from a travel perspective.
Well, Courtney, look at your numbers. I think you put them out for the whole Canada-US thing. Those are scary, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting, actually, this is some research I'm publishing tomorrow, is the if you look at travel spending, because there's a debit and a credit aspect to that, to international travel spend. What we're finding is that the U.S. on international travel spending, the net spend has been growing at the traditional rates, but it's all Americans. The growth has been pretty much all from Americans kind of spending out, which has helped the U.S. airlines, but the travel into the U.S. and the spend, I'm talking like hotels, cars, all of it, is down. So you start to hear things like Vegas is not doing so hot right now. You're really starting to see stuff like that.
Yeah,
all from charter flights to Supermax facilities in El Salvador, way up. So that's
yeah, right. So there's some sort of lining. I'm not sure what color, brown lining, whatever color you want. But on the so from kind of a civil manufacturer perspective, walk us through the usual suspects that we have: Boeing, Airbus, Embraer, and what they do on the defense side, and how those are balanced, and what we should consider going forward.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about there. First of all, look, globally, it's an embarrassment of riches in terms of defense spending. So all of them suddenly have that tremendous financial, I don't want to say windfall, but it's a nice tailwind, isn't it? Everybody. And a couple of things I'd point to at Boeing. For one, new leadership, adult supervision for the first time in several decades. And that's coupled with, they seem to have turned a corner on their god-awful fixed-price defense contracts. And the new contracts they're bringing in seem to be amazingly, possibly even profitable. So that's really good. I would also argue that given the high-tech nature of F-47 and other programs, maybe they have the opportunity to leverage digitization that they learn from this and apply it to the jetliner development side, I hope. Embraer is interesting. They've always had sort of I don't want to say schizoid, like a tri-schizoid, sort of thing. There's the part of Embraer that's a national defense champion, building the Gripen under license and KC-390, fantastic little military transport. And then there's jetliners, which is very separate, global, wonderful jetliners, but maxing out at 122 seats. They're great at what they do. And then business jets, of course. I don't see any signs of a whole lot of change in any of these things. There's one big possibility. KC-390 is in the running for two huge programs, one in India, one in Saudi Arabia, that could be up to 100 planes or so total. That would have a bit of a windfall effect that could impact their, future product development decisions on the civil side. As for Airbus, I think it's pretty steady state. There's an awful lot of European and other defense programs that are going to other companies. They're doing all right, but, not spectacularly. They're trying to keep the A400M military transport hanging on. They'll probably get some kind of share of FCAS, but I don't think very much of it at all. Helicopters, not bad. It's hard to identify them as the big winner in defense. However, they are the big winner in commercial, so it all works out.
And then, so Airbus has the A400. What else on the defense side you mentioned the helicopters, but...
Well, they have a small share in Eurofighter, for example, Airbus helicopters, space, of course, that's significant. And various smaller programs of all kinds. Again, they're not identified. Like Dassault. Dassault was like, okay, French lottery, got that ticket, and BAE Systems, doing just great, Rheinmetall. Oh my God. You look at the European defense winners and they're all like, going through the roof in share prices. I think it was Hensel that saw its share price double just after the Ukraine invasion. But Airbus is more steady state.
How much, just on the fighter side, the fifth, we're still fifth generation, I guess, but not necessarily stealthy alternatives to the F-35, Western stealthy alternatives. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, again, not on the defense side, that the greatest threat dictates the aircraft that they need, specifically on the aviation side. Europe, Ukraine has proven there's really nothing to worry about from the air other than drones and missiles. So the idea of a stealthy aircraft is not necessarily top priority, where you have, say, Japan, for instance, and their F-35s. I think they're just taking delivery of the next batch. There you're going up against the J-20. What's the
Chinese J-20, but also J-10s, which just did some pretty unexpectedly good work in Pakistan. Not to root for one side or the other, but the J-10 did pretty decently.
How much of that is affecting kind of, I guess, maybe an East versus West look at defense aerospace spending? Do you see a bifurcation there? Am I imagining things?
I think everywhere there's a threat, right? I think what is impressive is that China's economic rise is now being accompanied by a pretty impressive military and technological rise. And, the J-20 is sort of a fascinating story. In particular, you mentioned that. When it first showed up, I was just like, that's not a stealth. Look at that. It's got forward canards that move.
Yeah.
The joke goes, the best place to put canards is on somebody else's plane. It's just like, what are you thinking? That's not stealthy. But it's becoming...
These are the things we miss on the commercial side, because... ever since the Starfighter, Starship, we haven't had one. So
I know
it's great.
Or the Avanti.
The Avanti is still being built at one per year or something.
Yeah. I know.
That's right, the Starship. God, that was cool. 53 built, and they had to buy a bunch back.
And they're all sitting on the ground.
Sitting on the ground. Yeah. But the point is that, it was becoming very obvious. It's not really a stealth fighter. What it is a frontal stealth fighter that has fast speeds and kinematics and long range missiles. Basically, it's not going after fighters. It's going after our tankers and other big important enablers, AWACS, whatever else, rivet joints. So basically, they're trying to deny the Western allies use of the Western Pacific when it comes to these key planes. And that is changing calculations in combat aircraft design, which, clearly 500 nautical miles won't do you much good if your tankers are disappearing as the J-20s go after them. It's a very different environment relative to, 10 years ago.
Before we move into the deep, dark hole of talking about what China can do, I want to talk about engineers, particularly at the civil and defense aircraft OEMs. So Embraer, for instance, or even Airbus. How many of those engineers, say on the civil side, are available to shift with demand to, say, the defense side? Are they fungible in that perspective, or?
I've never met an engineer, and I'm the only person in my entire company, I think, who's not an engineer. But I've never met an engineer who didn't have a fungible mindset, that wasn't excited to work on an aerospace project in any number of disciplines. And of course, given the importance of subsystems to, final systems development, look, there's the data links, it's all incredibly fungible as you go down the supply chain. Given the fact that this is the first simultaneous civil and military market upturn that I've seen in my career and in most people's careers, this is a recipe for inflation, and we're seeing that. Now, you couple that with a decision to basically cut off the talent pipeline by slashing educational programs and, of course, cutting off H-1B visas for, Indian engineers and whatever else. This is a recipe for very serious cost inflation. Then you throw in high-tech development programs to the RDT&E budget, particularly Golden Dome, but whatever else, and you just wonder, where are these people coming from? How are we going to get? It's the biggest concern, I think, that maybe the industry faces, just the tremendous supply-demand imbalance for engineering talent.
For people at a time when global population growth is slowing, still growing, but then specifically you talk about the U.S. and the inflation numbers, I think, just came out today. Of course, they ticked up. But I think the story, and you alluded to it, that really is not being really given enough weight to it as we look at the impact of tariffs on goods prices, is the pricing of labor.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? That's driving so much more, and in a very rapid kind of correction. Is that the appropriate term?
That's more than a correction. I think it's this is going to take some time to play out, and it's going to be difficult. To me, the most interesting lesson or story I've ever heard in my career was the creation of McDonnell Douglas, 1967, which was the combination of guns and butter. Basically, you had McDonnell Aircraft Company pumping out 72 Phantoms a month. And you had the Douglas aircraft with a full order book of jetliners. It was just exactly the same sort of great markets we've got now today. Except McDonnell was cost plus and Douglas, commercial. So basically McDonnell said, we're just going to start paying everybody 10% more. Government's going to reimburse that. Good luck. Here's the articles of surrender. We suggest you sign them now. And that's how McDonnell Douglas was created. Basically, I'm concerned that we're going to have a crowding out effect, that the military is going to have a strong inflationary impact on the commercial side, impacting new product development decisions at civil aircraft companies.
And bear in mind the inflationary aspect of that, right? So as U.S. citizen, a proverbial blue collar person being like, great, wages are increasing. Why is everything more expensive? They come together, and the problem is that one tends to lead the other.
Totally. That's exactly right. And, there are many forms of inflation, as you know. Before the Trump administration got rid of the head of Bureau of Labor Statistics, I don't like these numbers. Give us new numbers. The fact is they were really good at keeping numbers, and hopefully they still will be. The new guy has simply said he won't do quarterly numbers. He won't do monthly numbers. Hopefully the quarterly numbers will still be good. But there are many different measures, and one of them is aerospace. And we were, unfortunately, leading the way in inflation. We're leading the way in...
we're number one.
We're number one. And a lot of that is labor, as you say. Almost all of it is labor. And, right now there's a strike in St. Louis, Boeing St. Louis. It's how many data points now? The answer is 40% over 4 years. Spirit Aerosystems, it took them a weekend to figure that out 2 years ago. United, American, Delta all signed 40% over 4 years. Boeing Commercial had a 53-day strike before they signed 40% over 4 years, which they could have gotten out of the way in 53 hours. And now we're going through the same nonsense in St. Louis. Just look, the data point is 40% over 4 years. This is, the word you used before, fungible. Exactly right. And it's not going to change anytime soon. If anything, it'll get worse.
Yeah. But how long is that sustainable, right? These kinds of trends? Right, because if you think like the whole pilot issue, right, which had a pilot shortage, everybody went in, right? They were able to at that point negotiate much higher pay raise, and now we're going into an environment where airlines are starting to struggle a bit. So that's going to probably, that's going to not help that, and there's probably going to be less demand for pilots. So then you're going back to like, well, we're paying these guys too much, and we don't need as many of them. So let's it's going to push away some of the demand from people that thought that going into and becoming a pilot was a great idea. So how do we just go through these shifts every 5-10 years, just where you kind of go, people are like, yeah, let's all go in, and then you realize by the time you get out, the job's not that great, so then it kind of falls away, and then you have to bring that back.
It depends on a number of macro factors. It's a really interesting way of looking. I don't think we're looking at a 5 to 10 year time horizon. I really don't. First of all, on the pilot front, yes, there is a slight pushback. You're exactly right. But my God, think where we've come from. We all remember, it was only a few years ago that some regional airline pilots were eligible for food stamps.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a shortage. I can't figure that one out. Shades of one of my favorite movies is Three Amigos. I am not a learned man like you, El Guapo, but could it be, if we paid them a little more, there'd be more of them. There are more of them now. They're earning much better wages. Thank God for that. Is there a slight pushback? Not enough to really dampen this increased wage, which is good. I don't like the idea of pilots earning wages that are commensurate with food stamps. It's a bad idea. In other words, it's 2 steps forward, half a step back.
Okay.
But in the case of engineers, let's look at the aircraft manufacturing sector and what are the macro trends? Markets. Are they going to slow down anytime soon? It sure doesn't look like it. Could be wrong. Doesn't look like it. What's the other mega trend? Cutting education and the new talent pipeline. That tends to have a very long tail. You cut off the next generation. Cutting back on H-1B visas. That's a long tail too thing, especially when you get a bunch of, Chinese and Indian engineers who feel like they're no longer welcome, so they go home, they stop coming here. And then on top of that, you've got tariffs and the end of globalization, or at least the reversal of globalization. Globalization was always kind of an inflationary pressure release valve. If inflation increases at home, you put more work abroad. Can't do that as much now. So all of this, Garrick, to answer your question, this is a lot longer process than 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's before we consider the impact of AI. Now, when you think about AI, the first thing everybody thinks of right now, peak bubble, right? We're at the peak of this cycle. People are like, oh, great, we can reduce the number of people we need. I don't think that's the impact that will eventually play out. What I think will play out is the number of people that you don't need is specific to how junior the position is. That's what AI has proven to be very good at, junior people. The problem is, if you don't hire the junior people, you don't make the senior people. And we don't feel that for another 5 to 10 years, that full impact. The, engineering, of course, is where we'll see probably the biggest hit from an aerospace perspective. It is incredibly, it is so exaggerated in the information technology space right now. You don't need a junior developer. AI will do it better than a junior developer. The problem is you'll never have a senior developer if you don't have a junior developer, and nobody's moving forward with that. Same applies on the engineering. So the idea that AI is going to be the relief valve for some of this, for some of these white collar shortages that we're going to see in that side, I think is actually a negative. It's only going to drive deeper shortages of the high value people.
It's a fascinating perspective, and that sure sounds right.
That's my whole jam.
Yeah,
just sound right. That's all I'm shooting for here, Richard.
I made a career of it, so
yeah.
It's got writiness to it. To quote Stephen Cooper, the only thing I can tell you is that at least that's only on the white collar side, on the labor side, on the machinist side. The very start of my career, I can still remember how much more labor-intensive factories were, and automation has changed all of that. So I think that's all that cycle went, and the machinists you get now are the machinists you'll probably need for a very long time.
I agree wholly with that. We've already gone through the automation cycle. That's right. Different than the AI cycle.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go, Garrick.
Yeah. All right.
We get to keep our jobs.
We get to keep our jobs for a while. Yeah. Well, we've talked about that. I know from my standpoint, I'm not worried about AI replacing me. Just I know a way to get information that AI does not. So
I turned 62 in a couple of weeks. So excuse me, I'm just going to check my watch right now. And
that's good. Garrick, I think I'm going to replace you saying that AI won't replace you with an AI voice when I edit. I'm just
yeah. An AI Garrick. There you go. Yeah. Well, it's always fascinating, right? But so I guess from maybe pivoting a little. Well, actually, no. You know what? I wanted to ask this before, but kind of going back to China, which is kind of, I know Courtney talked about mentioning it, but I think what's fascinating there is, I guess, when do we see China really have an influence on, I guess, other countries' decisions on military spending and everything else, especially when we're pissing people off with, big terror. We're creating more, more enemies than we are through all the decisions that the administration is making. So at what point, do people start looking at other countries like China, who is definitely becoming more relevant when it comes to the military side?
I think you're seeing it now. I think you've been seeing it. I really do. And here again, getting back to the theme, alliances, it's all down to alliances. The idea of having any kind of hope for preserving American influence and power in the Western Pacific without allies is just completely futile. As a matter of fact, maybe the biggest disappointment of many disappointments in recent months has been the pivot to Asia that was promised. It's not, because otherwise you wouldn't see us working so hard to piss off key players. The most important player, I would argue, in the southern part of the hemisphere, of course, Australia, as Lex Luthor said, waterfront property. And we had the AUKUS agreement with them, and as part of the pivot to Asia, for some reason, one part of the Trump administration, a couple of people have decided to put AUKUS under review without telling the Australians. In other words, we've decided to make Australia the new Canada in terms of another place to alienate our most important alliances. So
I get it. English speakers, funny accent.
Kangaroos. Right.
Yeah.
Moose,
kangaroo. Yeah.
But, just I think what's being forgotten is the voice of the last generation, mid-century America, my dad included again, which was the best way to preserve American way of life and democracy and freedom is with allies who think the same way. And thankfully, there's a whole bunch of them in Asia, South Korea, Japan, Australia, whoever else, and systematically alienating them, even on the fundamental military cooperation level like AUKUS, just seems beyond stupid.
It's been my grand theory of everything, Richard, that what we are going through today is basically a mourning period, MOUR mourning period, for the greatest generation. For the last really 60 years, we've had somebody somewhere, whenever somebody had some dumbass idea, somebody said, listen, we've seen what happens. You don't know what you're talking about. We've seen it. Sit down and shut up. They're now gone.
Totally. That's exactly right. It's horrifying to say. The lessons that we learned, I think it's Robert Kaplan who wrote that book, The Jungle Grows Back.
Yeah.
This sort of the great civilization that was built up. It wasn't perfect. God knows, but by no stretch was it perfect, and many mistakes were made. But in terms of creating a foundation for economic growth and human freedom and prosperity and whatever else, it really had never been equaled before. So turning your back on it seems, and it's a period of mourning.
So I was asked this question very recently, and it surprised me because it hasn't really been a topic. And I guess my own answer, which I won't give, I don't want to lead the witness here, but was a surprise to myself. There have not been a lot of discussions and talk around Taiwan in recent months. Now, granted, we're talking a generations issue and in the time frame of a few months. The question I was asked was, do you feel way better about the Taiwan situation than you did this spring? And I put that to you. Is there a fundamental shift in Taiwan and the threat that could possibly be there, or is it imagination?
Well, rightly or wrongly, President Biden ended the policy of strategic ambiguity and said, no, there's no ambiguity, we defend them. Strategic ambiguity is now back. Again, not judging whether that's right or wrong. It sure feels that there's more risk this year than there had been in some time, but on the other hand, maybe it has ameliorated. There's a wonderful series that's, I've seen the sort of opening previews and whatever else, but it looks very promising. 0 Day. It basically imagines Taiwan, little green man, operation short of war, gray threats, basically under siege, made in Taiwan. And I think that's sort of the feeling that this is a long game. It's unlikely to be something so crude as an invasion. It'll simply be a series of measures, that gradually erode independence and latitude of action. And we don't know how we're going to handle that. I mean, one problem is that DOD is increasingly, a lot of good people have left. Ditto for state. I'm not sure that the policymakers are in place to know how to deal with this. It's a real concern. I mean, Secretary of Defense Hegseth has even ended all cooperation between DOD and think tanks. It's this systematic lobotomizing. On the only positive side, if you're a believer in the crazy theory that, well, you got a madman at the home, so you don't do anything. President Xi says, this Trump guy is crazy. Maybe I shouldn't do something. Hey, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. But right now, it is the return of ambiguity, and we have no idea.
Yep. That was kind of my answer, which is nothing has changed. Other than the ambiguity, but that's really over the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's just, by the way, China doing what China does well, which is be patient.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, way better than us. And I'm talking individuals.
And they're funding engineering education, the opposite of us. They're trying to attract talent, come back to China. and whatever else. They're taking the opposite approach. So with that long-term approach and this aggressive war against science that's taking place in the U.S., you can't help but wonder whether we haven't handed them a huge advantage.
And I mean, look, it's tough to say, but China's kind of killing it right now. I mean, look at BYD as just an example, right? And not even in terms of market share, which they're great at producing and manufacturing and just scaling. That's what they've done for years. But these are quality, right? So the technical capability that you could argue probably was with Russia and the Soviet Union before is now largely sitting within China. Granted, there's great debate on whether MAGA is probably better pronounced MIKGA, if that's a thing. But outside of that, population decline in China, technological advance in China, does this balance out? Does one win over the other? We're getting more macro, but I'm curious your thoughts on how you think about that.
Well, I'm trying to stay in my swim lane, which is aerospace, of course. But in terms of the factors that influence aerospace, certainly on the defense side, they're doing it right. Pains me to say that. On the commercial side, maybe they're not doing it so right, but they're building up the kind of engineering and technological and knowledge base, as well as global political leverage that could create circumstances in which they get ahead. In terms of an export-driven economy, yeah. Oh my God, we took our company offsite in Mexico City this year, and after a week, I was looking in vain for a car that wasn't a BYD.
Oh wow!
And it's just flooded the market, and I spoke to the drivers, endless series of BYDs driving us around, and says, "Oh, how do you like your BYD?" Or I asked my wife's better in Spanish, so she did, and it was like, I love it. And meanwhile, at home, we're basically kneecapping the EV industry. Too woke, get rid of EVs. You can't help but wonder to what extent we're giving ourselves a lobotomy at exactly the wrong time, which is a point that Tom Friedman keeps making in every single one of his columns in the New York Times. I think, unfortunately, he might be right.
Sticking in the South China Sea real quickly, because I'm fascinated by this story. The question I have for you specific to this is, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? And just for hypothetical, let's say one of them is a Japanese destroyer and the other is a Chinese destroyer, Chinese Navy destroyer, and the other is a Chinese Coast Guard frigate or cutter. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a broader series of near collisions. The Philippines has experienced this, and actually, my old friend Mike Faby wrote a series of terrific accounts, Crashback, I think, about similar incidents between the U.S. Navy and whatever else. The point is that China is being very aggressive in naval operations, and we've known this for some time. And managing the rise of China is, as a consequence, one of the great big challenges, and I don't think we're doing terribly well with it right now.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Here's what's going to happen. You want my prediction? Here's exactly what's going to happen. The entire global economy over the next 10 years is going to enter a major shift. And you are going to retire and be like, haha, suckers, that's it, I'm out. And we're going to be left. We're going to be left without monthly letters to the industry. I'm sorry, what do you call it?
Well, I think you'll live just fine without my monthly notes of sarcasm, whatever they're called.
Sure, somebody else will enter the space.
But thank you. Yeah, there's always
somebody else.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Yeah. So you, I think you had mentioned you've been to the air show. You went to the air show in June. I felt it was a bit, and it was very much Airbus focused more so than anything else. But any big takeaways from the air show while you were there that are worth kind of discussing?
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is really the first show where this whole sovereignty and nationalism thing impacted me, and that lot decision out of Poland going for a European or an Airbus product rather than an Embraer product for basically 100% political reasons. Jens Vlatow in Aviation Week wrote a great column about that. That was a fascinating moment in time. But the U.S. and other companies, the response, we're no longer going to be national. We're going to be multi-domestic. Multi-domesticity was sort of pioneered by companies decades ago, then forgotten in the advent of globalization. It's coming back. You basically have to be a citizen of everywhere and have a much bigger presence no matter where you go if you're going to succeed as an export company. So that was fascinating. And, the phrase I heard was no Russia, no China, no ITAR. Basically, we fit in. We're local. Rely on us as your partner. The other big takeaway was sort of interesting. Embraer was racking up all these business jet sales, not doing all that great on the commercial front, racking up these great military sales. All of us, I think, have spent the past couple of years hoping and praying and wishing that Embraer would build a new jet and challenge Airbus and Boeing. I think all of us wanted that. I just don't think it's going to happen. That was the first air show where I was just like, this is not happening. And I feel sad for it, but they'd be mad to do this given the set of circumstances. So those were the big takeaways. That, and of course, people wondering what's happening on the tariff front and trying to prepare for that.
Yeah. Yeah, which changes daily depending on when you think you might have figured it out. You're like, well, at least we know what they are. No, try again.
Hold my beer. Watch this.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean the Embraer side, right? It's definitely an interesting side. We've talked about it quite a bit in terms of, what do they do next? Especially now that with the defense side kind of picking up, does that kind of push the board to kind of look at, hey, let's focus more on defense and the business side, which seem to be both doing well, versus commercial, which is just kind of hobbling along, right? At what point do they just kind of not do much more with that because it's just not as profitable as they'd like or profitable at all? But it does make you wonder kind of what's next for them. Where are they going to go? They keep talking about potentially getting into the narrow body space or the larger narrow body, let's say, because as we know from Courtney, the E195 E2 is a small narrow body. So,
but die on that hill.
But it does kind of raise, I think, a lot of concerns. I think from a lot of folks to kind of go, well, what are you getting into if you do get into that space, and how does everything else suffer because of it?
That's right. To me, one of the fascinating, there's a 2% chance of this happening, but still my most intriguing development that could happen in aerospace today is Embraer sells a whole bunch of KC-390s, to Saudi Arabia and India. And they look over at Jet Zero and say, you've got a really cool design. You're not going to build it. Cool design. How about we are the front and we get a whole bunch of risk sharing partners. Let's work together and recruit other people, maybe some sovereign wealth funds, which is its own problem. But there's like a 5%, 2%, 1%. I don't know what percent. It's a single digit % chance of this happening. But to me, it's like the greatest development ever in the history of aerospace.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Embraer builds great. They design and build great airplanes, right? I mean, on time as well, which is very strange in this industry. And so, right, they are there almost kind of like what I think of like Mitsubishi, not the RJ, but the Mitsubishi Heavy.
Yeah.
And just their ability to produce quality, and Embraer's moving into that. The 390 I'm fascinated by the aircraft. I have a conspiracy theory. I have a theory on that aircraft. I was telling Garrick that I think may have been at the genesis of this aircraft, but why is it called a 390? Did they just add to the 190 and then that should be the wrong answer.
Once upon a time, it was supposed to have a ridiculous level of commonality. I say ridiculous in all senses of the word. It was just that's just not realistic. It was supposed to have a lot of commonality with the 190. Absolutely. And,
Okay.
But they had done the mix and match thing for quite a few years. The 145 tube is the same basically as the 120 tube, I believe. So they're good at mix, but 390, of course, mutated into something completely different. Very impressive, but completely different. But yeah, your conspiracy is, yeah, that's right.
Nah, but hold on. There's my theory.
There's a worse theory coming. Don't worry.
Isn't the commonality? I think they missed an opportunity, and they could actually make up for it. The 390, given what it does so much better, is as valuable as 3-130s. 3 C-130s, right? That's there you go.
I warned you. It was going to be bad.
It's the old 3-for-1.
3-for-1.
If you want to make a program successful, just give it the correct designation, and you're there. That makes sense.
That's half the battle. Richard.
They should have named the A380 the 1540 or something. 1544, whatever. Twice 747 is.
That actually brings up a great next topic. Now that we're switching over to commercial, really the whole question around engineers and just kind of the supply is really around the end game for me is to understand commercial aircraft design and production and how much of this oversupply of aerospace engineers looking for projects to do is really going to be there. The idea of what comes next, and we always have this conversation with you. It's been 2 years since we've last had this podcast. So like that used to be a launch to entry into service timeframe a way long time ago. But what could possibly be on the horizon? I think last time we talked about the 22500, which is always kind of just hanging out there. Now there's a new and something I think is probably more likely, which is the 350-2000. We're hearing rumors and rumblings of. How have your thoughts changed? What are you thinking about today from the commercial aircraft program side?
Well, I think having, the big thing, adult supervision at Boeing moves the needle a little bit in the direction of them doing something, finally. I think they badly need to do something, and I hope they do. Is it still a base case, or is it a base case yet? Probably not. It's just too many. But Kelly Ortberg is changing the company, much for the better. And that moves the needle in my mind. 22500, I still think is a matter of time. Certain people have commented that the idea of using it as a template to develop a new wing, possibly re-engineering it, whatever, could just transform the Airbus single-aisle product line, new cockpit, whatever else. I'm intrigued with the 220. I am. You're right about the 350-2000. That would seem to be a matter of time. Obviously, it probably isn't going to be the Trent XWB powering that. I think it's just a little bit beyond. So that means either, a ultra fan from Rolls, or conceivably they've resumed talks that have been in abeyance for 10 years with GE. Also intriguing, or who knows, maybe Pratt has an idea, but I think the possibility is there. But, whatever it is, if we have the pleasure of speaking again in a year and a half or 2 years, or if you want to do it next year, whenever, I don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 years.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's the most depressing answer, yet truthful. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, you feel like on the OEM side, anybody that's going to, especially for Boeing, or even with Airbus, actually, when you think about for them to launch a new product that has potentially a new engine platform or a newer engine platform on there, they need to be confident that the current technology that's going to be put on there works, right? To me, I mean, why would you be like, oh yeah, we're going to do an A220-500 or something else from Boeing, and we're going to use the existing engines that are out there that everybody's complaining about because they don't stay on wing? It makes no sense, right? What operator is going to be like, oh yeah, sign me up for that? I mean, I think for me, they need to see, you told me you're putting all these fixes in place. We want to see it work. Once we see that it works and that we're getting some reliability, some, of what you promised, then we could talk about, hey, we're going to put this on our next thing. Because otherwise, I just don't see it working.
Totally right. That's perhaps one of the biggest disappointments, just the maturation associated with no longer new, but the current generation of single aisle turbofans. It's absolutely right. And that's a message that whether it's GE or Safran on Rise or whoever, Ultrafan, it's gonna be their highest priority. Just entry into service being a lot better than it was this time around. Totally right.
And so, if you look at the factors just facing the industry today, so I'm thinking more from an airline decision to go forward with a launch order, which is a little bit different than the OEM deciding to put something forward for really the next 30 years, right? If you add a 7-year program into it, almost everything is just lined up against that launch order happening. Great. You're going to give me 20% fuel burn? Well, fuel prices are not my problem today, right? Guess what is? Maintenance and reliability.
Right.
Labor costs, right? Which, by the way, both of those, you'll tell me that maintenance costs will come down, but I'm not going to believe you. I'm not going to give you credit for it this time. So I'm really hard-pressed to see why, outside of ESG initiatives, airlines go forward with the risk of an order unless it's not actually a risk to them and it's not actually a launch right now.
I mean, that sounds right. I mean, there's a couple of possibilities, though, that, for one, fuel prices are 70-ish now. What if they're 100 plus again? That changes the calculation.
Well, but then the issue becomes, well, why are they up there? And is it because of great demand, or is it because somebody did something and it's just suppressive of demand, for which airlines, right? You need both to move up at the same time.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. The other thing to think about, though, is right now airlines are persisting with their mid-market strategies for international routes, particularly transatlantic, as you well know. 321 still crushing it because it's the only game in town, not because it's good, but because it's there. So this, to me, is just somebody, for God's sake, if it's not going to be Boeing, I hope it's Boeing, but maybe it's Embraer and Jet Zero. Somebody needs to do a mid-market design, because if there's any area where there's a manufacturer and its allies poised to make strong profits off the back of higher prices for airlines, it's that mid-market. And airlines, it's the only part of the entire industry where I think the jetliner finance crowd, right, Garrick, would welcome a new product. Mm-hmm. Everywhere else, no, that dilutes the value of our portfolio. Please don't. But given the upward tick we've seen in prices on the 321neo, this is one place I think they would welcome innovation or welcome a new development.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's funny because you talk about, kind of the price increases, and I always wonder, at what point does the current product offering just get to be too expensive for an airline to justify? Like, is $100 million A321neo, which is going to, at this stage, right? Unless we have another downturn, things kind of get adjusted a little bit, but like we're going in that direction.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So 10 years from now, you could see, $100 million A321neo, unless you have something else that comes in and basically offers probably a better product or a lower cost per seat product like the NMA, right? I think that was the intent with Boeing initially when they talked about the NMA, was to kind of have that, middle of the market product that they're, kind of missing right now. And I don't know. I mean, it feels like I think Boeing should be the one to offer that, because of all the things I think that they're missing in the middle, right? I mean, they've got the MAX at the bottom, they've got the 777 at the top. They don't have much in the middle, whether it's on the passenger side or the freighter side.
The 78 is the best selling of the.
But it's not. It's
portfolio.
not. It's too big.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it's
the
too
Dash 8,
long range. Yeah, too heavy.
Dash 8 is too heavy. It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense, right?
So you've got 60-something thousand-pound thrust motors on it. Inherently, that's just not going to have the same costs as something with two 35,000-pound thrust motors. To say nothing of the much greater structural weight. So yeah, the 787. I mean, we all remember the Dash 3 version, which was sort of an intriguing, almost like a thought experiment back from 20 years ago. What if we just, and I think it was Steve Udvar-Hazy who said, you really need a Dash 4. Either way, we got neither. And so everything's counting around the weights and motors of Dash 8 or Dash 9, right? Yeah. But yeah, they need something in the mid-market.
And if we just consider the macro cycle of when kind of aircraft program, where we sit in that and how aircraft programs would fall, one of the big arguments that I had to OEMs waiting, we're starting to get past. And that is this idea of, well, we need to see what hydrogen is. We need to see what electric hybrid is. We need to see what these alternative opportunities could do before we launch a multi-billion-dollar effort into an obsolete program. I feel like we kind of know.
Yeah.
We're on the backside of that. I mean, Airbus walked exactly away from hydrogen. So, okay, step one of a 12-step process is complete. But like you said, like the reasons to not do anything, certainly over the near term, are there. The lone reason to do something, quite frankly, is Boeing's. To just do something.
Yeah.
The problem there is with what engine?
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to have test bed results of the Rise for another, 2 years now. And Rise is the new hydrogen. Rise is the
right.
New excuse,
well, fair enough.
Wait. But on the other hand, Mike Sinnott at Boeing, who I take very seriously, he's a really super smart guy, has said, no, we're more comfortable in our studies with a ducted motor. Mm-hmm. So, okay, if you are, then get on with it. And that, there could be a Rise that's ducted. There could be a scaled up GTF. There could be an UltraFan. I mean, fine, do it. I'm not a believer in the idea ever in our industry that some revolutionary and quote disruptive unquote new technology has ever obsoleted anything before it. The fact that the JT8D, a low bypass turbofan, was built well into the late 90s is proof of that. As a matter of fact, the last low bypass international plane, the 707, was built in the 80s. So just because you have some kind of new development, say it's open rotor or whatever, doesn't mean that you made a wrong call by launching something that was, different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if, I think in today's environment, would airlines trade reliability for efficiency? I mean, of course they always ask for both, right? But that was the problem, during the last round of these airplanes, that they said, no, we really want both. And so both OEMs went, okay, well, we'll make you both, but it didn't quite work out. So at what point do they start going, look, we like them to stay on wing as long as possible. It doesn't necessarily need to be that efficient. It needs to be more efficient, but not that much more efficient, right? At what point is that compromise going to take place to, where I guess, people start to rationalize kind of like, hey, we need to not ask for everything because that's going to be problematic.
Yeah. And of course, right now we've come off of that rather negative experience and hopefully it will get better, but people are still haunted by it. Simultaneously, you've got relatively, I don't want to say cheap, but not as expensive fuel as we'd feared. And interest rates are kind of high. That skews the calculation in favor of maintenance. It's just all of those factors, but all of those factors can and do change.
Yeah, if you consider, when the Neo and Max were entering their decision period, fuel was high, interest rates were zero or negative, and the idea of the risk of reliability on new aircraft was severely undervalued because it happened, right? Yeah. The difference is today, each of those factors has switched. Higher interest rates, fuel prices, certainly manageable, not the top priority, but the risk of new products, the entry into risk and the reliability risk of new products, I think is overvalued right now. I think you are more likely to just be like, whoa, no, I'm just going to sit this one out until I see what's happened today. Probably more than they should. So that just further delays decisions on the next
That sounds
program.
exactly right. That sounds exactly right. We're haunted. And no, that's right.
All right, so I've got, we've covered a lot of different things today, and it seems there's it definitely, there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of gray areas, there's a lot of unknowns. So from running an advisory firm, right? How do you advise your clients based on that, right? I mean, because it's the challenge there to be able to kind of say, look, here is what we think you should be doing to be prepared for what could come with everything that's going on. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I do a bit of side work with a geopolitical risk company, Eurasia Group. Really enjoyed it. And their message is, sort of, if you choose not to do something, you've made a choice. It's a really terrific message that I think I try to bring over to our aerospace consultancy. Getty Lee said it best from Rush. If if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. I think it was a Rush song. In other words, let's get on with it. My fear is that people don't make the necessary investments in whether it's product development or new expansion or hiring or whatever, because of fear of something, be it tariffs, be it, other kind of retaliatory trade or a recession. This is a long cycle business. I mean, look, the only, we were saying before, the 7-year cycles, that's a long cycle. And even that, I don't think is the way. I think things have gotten really super long cycle, like 14, 15 years. You got to plan for a long period of time. And even beyond that, cyclicality could be, 10, a dozen, 14 years, 1 or 2 bad years, and then you resume growth. You just have to think that way. So I guess believe it or not, to answer your question, try to stress the optimistic world of opportunities in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah. What could you be stuck without? Right? Like, the idea is, would you rather have a plan that, because it goes to crap for everybody, is now not a good plan? Or would you rather be missing out while everybody grows? And there's actually an argument to be made that you don't want to be in the latter camp, because that's what costs people their jobs. That's what.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And
look at COVID. Nobody got fired during COVID. Everybody got fired after, right? When they weren't the ones that were recovering.
Well, that's totally right. And it is sort of, you look at the factors that have transformed the world economy for all of my life, not just work life, but physical life. The world economy was defined by adequate or inadequate levels of demand. Well, and this is not an original idea, surprise, but for the past couple of years, since COVID, as you say, we've been defined by not demand, but supply. Adequate, and it's not just true for our industry, it's true for almost every industry.
Yeah.
And I look at the secular trends behind that major shift in world affairs. They don't look like they're changing anytime soon.
Right. They're accelerating in that direction, for sure.
Even accelerating in that direction. So I think in that kind of environment, you plan for a future of opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah. Do that, Garrick.
All right. I will. Done. I took the notes. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, this is great.
This has been absolutely
we've gone
fantastic.
15 over what we normally do for heavy checks, since we should take longer on the first. Yeah. But
labor shortages. It's supply chain issues. That's why we've gone 15% over. Yeah. No, but so yeah, Richard, look, this is fantastic. We always love to hear what you have to say, and it's great that you're keeping busy in lots of different ways, and you're in the same camp as us. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen next, and it just changes every day, which is what makes this industry so much fun, right? Because at least, right, you just never know. So, so thank you again for taking the time, and actually before we go, because we will have you on again. So whether it's a year from now, whether it's a year and a half from now, hopefully it'll be sooner than that. But any predictions of something that could happen before the next time that we speak. And we'll see next time we speak, we'll see if it happened.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Jet Zero and Embraer. I got you down for that one. You don't need to answer.
I'm going to raise that to 6% as a possibility. I'm willing to give this as a base case scenario that we have a significant improvement in supply for the first time in quite a while by the time we speak next year. In other words, we've had all these sort of false starts in the recovery. If people keep the course with making the necessary investments, I think next year looks pretty darn good, and the first half sees a double-digit increase in output for this industry and moves us towards greatly wished for state of actually keeping up with the level of market demand we've seen over the past. So I'm kind of
first step towards overproduction. Great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that gets to the other half of that equation, which is what does demand do in the meantime?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've got this period where there's this big gap. There had been this big gap between supply and demand, which implies if there is no shock to the system, pandemic or whatever, what are we going to do? Gut the CDC and not be prepared for a pandemic? Oh boy. There's all sorts of possibilities, but if there's no outlier scenario, no black swan, as it were, then basically it's going to take us a long time to catch up to that supply deficit. So this could be a longer, more sustainable upturn than we've ever seen before. Again, exogenous shocks notwithstanding.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even and we've talked about this a little bit in terms of even with, kind of a more normal type downturn, whatever that means. I think there's a lot of cushion that can absorb that from the supply side. Right. Yeah. I think there's definitely a lot of room there, which could help. So, but cool. That was a great answer. So we'll see if you are correct. As we're, next time we talk and we're like, oh yes, Airbus is at 75 a month, Boeing is at 60. We're, a year from now, that's not going to happen. But in that direction. So that'll be great. So thanks again, Richard. It's definitely, it was a pleasure to have you on.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on. I didn't say that aircraft should be hauling garbage. I said it should be hauled away as garbage.
23?
How long have we been doing this, Garrick?
It's 2.5 years. Yeah, we're at, it's like, 60 of these? Something like that?
Oh, my God. I need to reassess life priorities here.
Yeah, I know.
It's too late for that for me, but you go ahead and save yourself.